Come along with us as we bike from Pittsburgh to DC on the Gap Trail and then later on the CNO Canal Towpath. This trip will be 333 miles. It'll take us 6 days of biking, 7 days total, because we will have a rest stop in Harpers Ferry, West Virginia. My spouse and I have wanted to do this trip for a couple years now, and this year it worked out. We started seriously training in February, and slowly and steadily we increased our long rides each weekend. Our longest ride was 50 miles, and I mean, following typical marathon training plans, we think this will be enough. Our longest bike ride will be about 65 miles, so we think if we can do 50 on a training ride, we'll be golden for the trip. Unfortunately, I tweaked my knee during our last long bike, and so I had to pivot and rent an e-bike. Golden Triangle had bikes available, so they saved the trip for me. They're about a mile from the start on the Gap Trail, and they have e-bikes. They also have regular bikes too, so they're a great place to rent from if you're flying in or coming in from out of town to do the Gap Trail. Today we're going from Pittsburgh to Connellsville. It's 61 miles with 1,500 feet of elevation gain. We're from Pittsburgh, so everything so far in this video is things that we've done before during our training rides or just recreationally running and biking through Pittsburgh. This was the hottest day of the trip, and it's actually the hottest day that we've biked so far. So, making sure that we get enough hydration and enough electrolytes is a bit of a concern for us. Coming over this bridge, we are headed into McKeesport. This is one of my favorite parts on the early bit of the Gap Trail when you're coming from Pittsburgh to McKeesport. I just think the blue of this bridge really pops. And based on the way I have my camera mounted, you can't quite see it that well. But there's a nice little boating marina off to the right there. So you can just see the Youghiogheny River. And then again, like I said, I'm a sucker for a bridge and a marina. You do have to walk across this bridge. It's kind of tight and it is a shared sidewalk with pedestrians. So there are signs asking you to dismount and walk across. We did have people coming from the other direction who chose not to dismount. And so it did get a little tight trying to let them get through basically without getting hurt. Biking through McKeesport is probably the largest road section that you have on the Gap Trail, and it looks kind of bad here because it looks like it would be a busy road, but it's actually a dead end, so it's not as scary as it looks. Here we had one of our first major climbs of the day. So you go from the road in McKeesport and then you start climbing up this little, I don't even think I would call it a mountain, but it does get quite steep when you round the corner right here. And this is where we really notice the difference between me being on my little moped and my husband being on a human powered bike. I was kind of cruising up this hill and he was definitely noticing the incline. It's pretty though.
Huh?
Pretty.
Yeah. Now the real film.
Yep. I'm just excited to get past the guest book, like in Boston. Right now, we're rolling up into Boston, which has like a nice little snack hut, coffee, water, just a nice little town to take a break in. This is the Red Cliffs. They're red due to acid mine drainage, which is pretty common in central and western Pennsylvania. Now we're approaching West Newton, and West Newton's about the halfway point for the day. So this is where we're going to take our lunch break. We stopped at the Trailside Bar for lunch. We really loaded up on water, refilled our water bottles, my Camelback, and I had a burger. That was pretty good. Just a funny moment from day one, but we stopped at the Dravo Cemetery and we got talking to two different bikers. You know, bikers are a friendly crowd and you're stopping having a drink, so you get to chatting. And they didn't know each other at first. Like they just kind of were chatting with us. And then they realized that they're neighbors and from a neighborhood in the city. And they just happened to run into each other 16 miles down the Gap Trail. But that's kind of how Pittsburgh is. It's a really small, big city. I think everyone is 2 degrees of separation. This is my first time ever being on an e-bike, and it's amazing just how much assistance it provides. It's a pedal assist bike, so there's no throttle. I keep joking that I'm on a moped, but I do have to pedal um, every every mile that I'm going. There is no throttle, like I said. Here we are. We're finishing in Connellsville. They had a summer festival going on, and so the park was packed, which is always great to see, especially in small towns in the summer. We ended up going to Ballymoon and Sushi for dinner, and it was, you never know in a small town, but it was phenomenal. I highly recommend it. We watched the Riverhounds game because they were home back in Pittsburgh. Um, the restaurant did have the World Cup showing, so I didn't feel like too much of a jerk having a soccer game pulled up on our phone. And then after dinner, we popped over to World Gelato and we had some dessert, and it was also very great. We stayed at the Connellsville B&B. We stayed in the Irish Room, super spacious. We had our own private bath, and it was very quiet. We were able to fall asleep pretty early since we had had such a early start and a long day. Um, We are credit card camping on this trip, so we'll be staying at bed and breakfasts, hotels, and Airbnbs. We will not be camping out along the way. Day two, and we're biking from Connellsville to Confluence today. We have 28 miles, so it's our shortest day of the trip, a nice little reprieve after a 60-mile ride yesterday. And we have about 900 feet of elevation gain today. So we'll be climbing, mostly getting to Ohio Pile. Ohio Pile is a nice little mountain town. A lot of Pittsburghers go to Ohio Pile for hiking weekends. There's some ski resorts nearby, Falling Water, which is a Frank Lloyd Wright house.
Great.
Good,
Tell you what.
because I feel like garbage. So
One thing we learned on day one was that inevitably, when you decide to take a break randomly in the middle of the trail, when you get back on trail, you'll find a nice little bench like 100 feet up the trail. So today we started saying, hey, I think I'm going to need a break in a mile, maybe 2 miles. Let's start looking for a bench. And we saw this little overlook right at the top of a climb. There's still a little bit more to climb when we get back on the trail, but beautiful overlook. You can't quite see the river the way we could see it. But just like I said, great great little overlook. There's a group from Arkansas that we have been yo-yoing a little bit today, and they pulled up just as we were finishing up at this viewpoint. So it was just nice to see multiple groups get to stop and see this viewpoint. They are going a bit further than us today. Obviously, we have a short day, but maybe we'll bump back into them tomorrow. Ohio Pile was about our halfway point today, so we did spend an extended amount of time there. We ended up going to Ohio Pile Coffee Company to have coffees, and then we had a peanut butter melt away as a nice little treat before heading over to Peddler's Pizza. We had hoped to get a late breakfast there, but they stopped serving breakfast at 11, so we ended up getting a pizza, which was totally fine. Funny enough, while we were sitting there, we bumped into some friends from Pittsburgh, which is it's kind of jarring because we had been biking for 9 hours at this point, so it felt like we were very far from the city, but in actuality, we're only about 45 minutes from the city. So it was nice to see some familiar faces. We sat by the river for a little bit before getting back on trail. My knee was bothering me quite a bit today. My husband was able to find this spray that they use on athletes, like the cryo spray. It didn't really work. Ibuprofen was the best thing to help with my knee that we found. We biked through this little passageway multiple times. It was a canopy of trees, and you're going through the ledges of the slate rock cutout, and it was at least 10 degrees cooler biking through that area. It's such a cool experience. Before we knew it, we were in Confluence. We have to go across a little bridge to actually get into the town of Confluence. We went to Trailhead Brewing and had a couple beers, watched some World Cup matches. Tonight we are staying at the Parker House. We stayed in the Maple Room, again, a private bath, which is always much appreciated. They did have a kitchen if we had decided to cook in. Before dinner, we wanted to get some laundry going, so we did head into town to do our load of laundry since we've biked for 2 days. Unfortunately, the laundromat is closed. The brewery is actually where the laundromat used to be, so I just did a quick wash of our bike shorts to get us through. Tomorrow, when we're in Cumberland, we will be able to do laundry at the hotel. So then we headed over to dinner at the river's edge. It was truly on the other side of the street from our bed and breakfast, and it was phenomenal. Best meal I've had on the trip, and I think my husband was a little jealous of my steak dinner. Today is day 3 on the Gap Trail, and it's our final day on the Gap Trail. When we finish today in Cumberland, we will officially be at mile marker 0 of the Gap. We have 63 miles on the day and about 2,000 feet of elevation. Today will pretty much be exclusively climbing because we need to get to the Eastern Continental Divide. But once we reach the Continental Divide, it'll be all downhill for the rest of the day. We walked back into town for breakfast. We had Mitch's Fuel, which is inside of a gas station. Typical diner food. I had some eggs and bacon, but great fuel to get us going for another long day. Charging my bike each night has been pretty seamless. Most of the places that we've stayed have had a place to park the bike, so I've been able to just plug in the battery directly. If not, I can unplug it and bring it into the room with me. So it's been super convenient. I've had about 20% battery left each day, so I definitely need to charge it overnight. Today we had our first major trail hazard. Some storms rolled through last night, so we think this tree was probably from that. At first, we were panicked that we'd have to lift the bikes up over because the e bike is quite heavy, but we're actually able to just roll it alongside underneath the tree trunk, so not that big of a deal. With that being said, we're well over 100 miles into the trip already, and that was our first major hazard. These trails are so well maintained by the trail councils in the area. We're very lucky in the state of Pennsylvania to have such great access to great rail trails and the volunteers who help clean it up. Here we went past a guy who was headed up, we presume, to clean up some of those fallen trees. We've been looking forward to this stretch for a while this morning. So we go over a bridge and then we go through the Pinkerton Tunnel and then we go over another bridge. So, kind of following the Castleman River, it kind of makes a horseshoe, which is why we end up having to cross it twice so closely together. So that was the tunnel. We decided to take a longer break in Rockwood today. Rockwood's a very small town in Somerset County, but very special to us because when we were first thinking about this trip, we decided to bike from Rockwood to Frostburg, stay overnight in Frostburg, and then bike back the next morning to see if a trip like this was something that we even wanted to train for. And we just had such a great experience. We rented from the bike shop in Rockwood, and then Frostburg's like a cute little college town, but we had a great time when we stopped there, and it kind of, lit the fire to do this trip. Bathrooms are easy to come by on the Gap Trail. Every town that you stop in will certainly have a bathroom or a porta potty at the trailhead. I sped ahead from my partner a little bit at this point because I had overhydrated in Rockwood, and we knew that there was a bathroom up here. We're quickly and surely making our way to Myersdale. Right here is the Myers family cemetery, so we stopped to pay our respects to multiple generations of the Myers family. And then we headed over the Salisbury Viaduct, which is another one of my favorites on the Gap Trail. It's just spectacular views. You bike over cornfields, you bike over the highway, you bike over the railroad tracks, and I believe even the river at one point. So really anything you could bike over, we did. Myersdale's kind of tricky because the trailhead sits on top of a hill, so you have to go down quite a steep hill to get into the actual town where any of the restaurants would be. So we opted to walk in. We have biked this hill, like I said, when we did this bike trip in the fall, and we figured we've done the hill once, we don't have to do it again. We ate at Donjan's Drive-In, and I had a steak wrap with some French fries, which really hit the spot. It was funny because there was a group of construction workers that came in after us, and they had asked our waitress what we ordered, and it was funny because they ended up ordering the same thing as us, and she came by later, to see how it was and if we liked it, and she's like, I was thinking like it would be really bad if you didn't like it because all those guys ordered the same thing. So yeah, then we headed out. We're climbing till we get to the divide. There's a Amish stand outside of Myersdale that does donuts on the weekends. Unfortunately, we came through on a Monday, so there were no donuts, but we got cookies and those little maple treats, and they're just absolutely delicious, perfect snacks for a bike trip. And again, I can't say enough about being on an e-bike. The climb today was not terrible at all for me by any means. I ended up taking the backpack so that my husband had an easier climb because again, it was night and day being on a self pedal bike to a pedal assist. But before we knew it, we had made it to the Eastern Continental Divide. We have a nice flat stretch here on our way to Big Savage Tunnel. This is the longest tunnel on the route, and I definitely recommend having a headlamp or some sort of bike lamp going through here. When we did this trip in the fall, we did not have any lights, and we really regretted it because there were missing lights throughout the tunnel, and they were just delayed they would turn on. We were pleasantly surprised this year. The lights in the tunnel were great, actually. It was night and day compared to last year. But again, I would definitely still recommend headlamps. There's some notches carved out in the trail and just some grooves and some potholes that you'd avoid if you could. I'm pretty proud of myself this year. I kept the pace with my spouse. I didn't really take off. Last year when we went through, I got a little spooked, convinced myself there would be bats or monsters, I don't know. But I spooked myself, so I went pretty fast through the tunnel. He was like, you took off, and I figured I'd see you on the other side. But this year I was able to slow down and just keep pace with him. We're essentially at the southern border when we hit the vista on the other side of Big Savage, and a little bit down the hill we'll hit the Mason-Dixon line. But we sat for a little bit at the overlook trying to guess which mountain range we were at. Later on, when we get closer to Cumberland, we pulled out our Google Maps again and we realized we kind of make a horseshoe. So, kind of what we're looking out at from the vista is truly the other part of the Gap Trail when we were about 10 miles out from Cumberland. And just there, we passed the Mason Dixon line. About 9 miles out from Cumberland, we saw our best wildlife of the trip. We saw this beautiful rattlesnake. He was probably 20 or 30 feet out when I was first able to see him, which is a great distance to be able to notice him from. So we just pulled over and just really enjoyed him. He did not care about us at all. He was just working his way across the trail and then headed over to the railroad tracks. So, I mean, we didn't startle him. We did not hear his rattle or anything, but just very impressed. Did not realize how beautiful and shiny rattlesnakes could be. We always get a little jumpy after we see a snake, so try to give each other a little bit of space that way in case anyone swerves or slams on their brakes. When I tweaked my knee, Cumberland became a destination for me. I knew I was stubborn and in shape enough to get to Cumberland, and that's where I was going to reassess. So Luckily, I'm feeling really good, so I will continue on and be able to push to the CNO. But Golden Triangle will pick up bikes in Cumberland, and it's a big enough town that I could have found a car rental and I would have just kind of crewed my husband from town to town on the CNO. But yeah, I'm excited to be able to push through. I'll tell you what, you don't appreciate a macadam trail until you have been on cinders for 50 miles. Every time that we would hit the asphalt, we would get so excited because we just move so much faster when we're on a paved trail. And before we knew it, we were coming into Cumberland. It did get a little busy on the trail coming in, which is great. I always love to see the locals being out in their communities and enjoying their trail systems. So I'm happy to deal with a little congestion when we make it to town. Little bit of a road crossing here, not a big deal. And we're really excited because we know that the arch is coming up and that we hit mile marker 0 and the gap is officially done. We can close the chapter on the first trail of this trip. This was our first hotel of the trip, so we stayed at the Marriott Fairfield Inn and Suites. They let you keep your bikes in your room, which was kind of funny. My husband and I both travel for work, so wheeling our bikes down a hallway was unique for us. And I will say, beware if you're hitting Cumberland on a Monday. A lot of the restaurants are closed. We ended up at the Baltimore Street Grill, and it was delicious. I had a crab cake sandwich. There was a brewery open right next to the hotel, Dig Deep Brewing, that we were able to pop into. So it all worked out, but your options are a little limited. And that's it as far as the Gap Trail goes. Tune back in to see our CNO Canal Towpath journey.